In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how powerful the N.I.N.A software is and why everyone I recommend who has any interest in astrophotography get this software. Not only is it powerful, but more importantly, it's free. So it's very easy to obtain. The only problem, the biggest drawback to the software is that the learning curve is relatively steep. But once you get used to it, it's quite powerful, and I'm going to demonstrate tonight how I can select a target, frame it, and also set up a complete imaging sequence from start to finish. Let's get started. The first thing I've done is open the N.I.N.A software, and as you can see there, it's not a typical Windows interface, but it is quite customizable once you get a feel for how it works. Now tonight we're going to be imaging the Pleiades, which is a pretty popular target for this time of year. And we're going to start with the framing wizard right here. And the most important thing to do at this point is to put your camera and telescope parameters in here. And for my particular camera, which I'm using the Canon EOS RA, I put in the sensor size, width and height, the pixel size, and almost as important is the focal length, because I'm going to show you in a second that it automatically will generate a frame for a field of view depending on whatever parameters you put in there. So we're going to put in Pleiades here. And here we can select the Pleiades here. And the first thing you want to do is load an image. Right now you can see this is the profile here for the transit, what time it's going to be tonight. And as you can see, this is between these two bars here is the night time. And it's going to peak right in the middle of the night, which is just perfect for this object. It'll give you the maximum imaging time. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load the image. You can pick the survey if you like, but I find that the default survey works quite well in terms of getting an image that's adequate for you to frame. So let's load the image. The field of view right now is set at 4 degrees. We can adjust that depending on how things look. Right now we're just waiting for the image to load. Now this square that you see here is automatically generated by the parameters that you put in over here. And as you can see, the framing is pretty good right now. It fits very nicely into the field of view that's appropriate for my camera and telescope. Now, the other thing you want to do is you may want to rotate the field of view just slightly, depending on the object. It's actually framed pretty well for my purposes right here, but the way that you do that is with this rotation right here. So as you can see, it rotates the panel. This wouldn't be a bad orientation here as well, but I think the horizontal orientation is better. And then once you've selected that, you've got all your parameters set and you've framed it appropriately based on the rotation and the size. The next thing you want to do is add the target to a sequence. And for me, I like the advanced sequencer. The legacy sequencer is simpler, but the advanced sequencer is more customizable. So what I've already set up here is OSC rotate, which means one-shot color with automatic rotation, meaning that when I enter this into the sequencer, it will determine the appropriate rotation. And when I start the sequence, it will tell you what the appropriate rotation is. If you need to rotate the camera, you can either do it manually, or if you have an electronic rotator, it will automatically do that for you. So I'm going to select OSC rotate. Once I do that, it automatically opens the advanced sequencer right here. And once again, you can see the profile for when it's going to be highest in the sky. Looks like it's going to be somewhere around 11 o'clock or so local time. And at this time of year, it's quite dark at that point. And this particular night, the moon is a waxing crescent. It's still small, and it'll set about 9 p.m. local time. So this will be just fine as far as timing goes. So now you can see that there are various parameters that are already put in. You can make your own template depending on what object you select. And in this case, I'm doing one-shot color, which comes with certain parameters that I've already put in here. And you can see that triggers. The meridian flip is very important. If you have a telescope that it will automatically do the meridian flip, it will do that automatically for you at the appropriate time. And we'll see in a little bit that the imaging, once we get to the imaging portion, it will tell you exactly the time the meridian flip is. So you'll have an idea of when to monitor that to make sure it goes smoothly without any cord tangling. Now you might notice that up here it tells you that the coordinates, these things are automatically entered depending on the object that you put in there. The RA and the declination are automatically entered. And there are other parameters down here that you might want to take a look at. These are just text annotations that really don't affect the imaging session. But the most important thing here is the loop conditions. And for my particular setup, the Canon EOS RA, I have found that sometimes it will lock up if you just go from one image to another. So I have programmed in a time span between exposures of 10 seconds. And the rest of these parameters you can inspect and program to your taste. But typically I take about a 5-minute exposure with 300 seconds. And you can see it's a light exposure. And I will do about 50. In this case, you can see here loop for iterations, 50 iterations. That's just my typical setup. You can also see these red exclamation marks, which just indicate that the equipment is not hooked up. So once we get into the portion where I'm going to attach my equipment, you'll be able to see these red exclamation marks disappear. Okay, now that we've programmed in the framing and the other important parameters, we're going to connect my equipment. So click the equipment tab up here, and as a shortcut, this here will connect everything. I just want to make sure that my Canon EOS RA is on here, so it's not at the moment, even though it's connected. I'm going to scan for devices. And now it shows up. So that's the problematic piece of equipment in my setup. The Canon EOS RA, although it is a good camera, it has some glitches, and not just with N.I.N.A software, but just in general, when it comes to being controlled by the PC. So now that I see that it is in the list of recognizable pieces of equipment, I'm going to go ahead and push connect. And it's asking to connect all devices. N.I.N.A is really good as far as compatibility with a wide variety of the commonly used astronomical equipment. So I'm going to say OK. And now as it connects over here, you'll see the camera's connected. Now I am using the iOptron SEM 70 mount. So it opens up the dialog box here, and I will select OK. Make sure that it's recognized. And you can see over here it is. I'm getting this warning here that the mount clock differs from the computer clock, and the way that I fix that is to bring up the mount panel. This only applies to this particular mount. You may have similar errors depending on your device. Here, sync from PC time, right here. So now we're all synced, and all of my equipment are connected appropriately. I am using PhD2 for auto-guiding as far as software goes. The PhD stands for Push Here Dummies because it's a very simple program and it's very powerful. And again, it is free. And here is the interface for PhD2. And you can see that it's already imaging for my guide scope. And let's go back to the N.I.N.A. And as far as my equipment, I'm also using the William Optics FLT 120 refractor telescope for my primary telescope. And now we're going to go back to the sequencer. I'm going to close all these windows. Now, we're all set as far as the parameters. The only other thing I would check is when the sequencer will actually start. And here, one of the triggers here is nautical dusk. So wait for time, nautical dusk. Right now, the nautical dusk has passed for me. And it gives you this is all computed for you. The time is 1732 when nautical dusk happens. And down here you can see that it's already 1811 as far as local time goes. So this will start. It will not stop and wait based on the nautical dusk time. But you might want to check that if you want to start a little bit earlier before nautical dusk has actually arrived. And the other parameters, you can see we're going to scroll down here. And we're back to the loop for iterations. And now we're going to start. And we just start by pushing the start button, obviously. And now what it's going to do, it's going to point the telescope. First, it's going to point the telescope to the coordinates that are programmed. And we're going to push start, and it's going to do that now. And now it's slewing. And the cool thing about this is that it will point, and it will to where it thinks it should be, and it will take an image. And then it will compare that image to a known database, and that's called plate solving. And this is done all automatically by the software. So right now it's taking an image. And it's exposing. And you can see the results. It'll tell you right here what's going on. And now it wasn't within the parameters, so it's settling and slewing. And it's slewing based on this star pattern you can see here. It's a little bit faint. And you can see down here it says solving. Telescope not inside the tolerance. So it's actually going to move the telescope. It's going to nudge it a little bit based on where it thinks the star should be compared to what it's actually seeing. Now it's doing another image, and this is all done automatically. And now it's satisfied. You can see the Pleiades here. It's pretty obvious, the star patterns. Now it's starting the guiding, so it's starting with the PhD2 software right there. So it's already selected some stars. You can see the little green circles, and it will be tracking those and making adjustments if there's any small movements in their position. So now it's going through an autofocus routine. And this is very cool. I'm using the ZWO-EAF electronic focuser, which I've hooked up to my telescope. And it's going to start with the current last focus position, and then it's going to go slightly out of focus, take a few images, and it's going to measure what I would call the width of the stars. In other words, the narrower the width of the star pattern, the better focus it is. So we can see that it started out with a width of 10, almost 10. It moved the focuser, and it's down to 8. Now I like to track this by going to the actual imaging tab over here, and it will tell you, and you can actually see as it progresses how the focus changes. Now we're down from 10, 8, 6, 4. You can see it's improving. In other words, the width of the star pattern is decreasing. And over here you can see what the actual position of the focuser is. This is an arbitrary number based on the settings of the focuser. It may depend on your electronic focuser. And now you can see the pattern is starting to curve. So the focus is just about perfect at this point. Now it's going to go past the focus, and it's going to curve up in this direction. And you'll see that in a moment. And you can see the parabolic curve is starting to curve upward. And somewhere around 8,000 a little bit less than 8,000, you know, maybe 7,980 or so. It looks like it's going to be the perfect focus, somewhere around here. And you can see still that the perfect focus, or the nearly perfect focus, is going to be objectively somewhere around this point. 79, close to 8,000. And right now we're at 7780. And it's going to move the focuser to where it thinks the bottom of this parabola is. And it's selected 8005. And it's going to take an image just to confirm. You'll be able to see these stars, see how they look better now. And now that it's happy, the autofocus window disappears, and now you can see it's exposing the first image. It's going to be 5 minutes, which was 300 seconds that we saw. And over here you can track the progress. Number of iterations, it's on number 1. 0 have been done already, so it's on number 1 of 50. And we'll just let it go. I want to point out that it's important that over here in the options section, you see options here, under imaging, you want to select the correct image file path. And the way you do that is do that. I need to create a new image folder. Since this is the Pleiades, we're going to select a new folder. And we're going to call it Pleiades. And then we're going to select that folder. And you can see it's confirmed here. My subfolder, I'm using N.I.N.A images for obvious reasons, and a subfolder of the Pleiades. So now we're going to go back to the sequencer and see how it's doing. And it's still on the first image. It's about, oh, not quite halfway there. And then we're going to resume this after all 50 images have been taken. And we're going to see how the flat wizard will help you automatically determine the correct exposure depending on what flat field projector you're using to determine the proper exposure for whatever flat fields you are going to do. Just wanted to point out that if your rotation of the image is not consistent with your framing, you will get an error here that tells you how much to rotate in terms of degrees. Now, just to demonstrate the utility of the N.I.N.A software, we're about to witness a meridian flip. And for those who are unfamiliar, an equatorial mount can track to the meridian, but once it gets a little bit past the meridian, it runs into the possibility of the eyepiece hitting the tripod. So what happens ideally at the meridian, the software will move the telescope to the other side of the pier, essentially reversing the image. So when it reaches the same point, it will be pointing at the same point in the sky, but the image will be upside down compared to the previous images. Now N.I.N.A, if it's in the middle of a image, which you can see right here, it's in the middle of the image, and it just reached the meridian time, the time of the meridian. And we'll see what it does here. Now it's starting another exposure, and the reason it's starting that exposure is because if we go to the options tab here, it says it will continue to image 5 minutes past the meridian at a maximum of 10 minutes. So right now we just reached the meridian and started a 5-minute exposure. So after this 5-minute exposure is completed, then it will begin the meridian flip. Let's go back to the imaging here. And we can see that it's 33 seconds into the 5-minute exposure. I'm going to pause it here and resume when it's close to 5 minutes, and we'll see the meridian flip. Okay, now we're about half a minute left in the 5-minute exposure. And when this is finished, it should begin the meridian flip. if we recall, we're seeing that we're more than 5 minutes past the meridian, reaching the meridian, but it's programmed to not go more than 10 minutes past the meridian. So in theory, at the beginning of at the end of this exposure, we're about to reach it, it should begin. There we go. Stopping the tracking to flip the scope. Now what's going to happen, take note of the orientation here of the stars. It almost looks like an inverted dipper formation. So when it finishes the meridian flip, it's going to take an image and try to point to the exact same point in the sky, but the difference will be this image will be inverted. And that's fine if you have software that can handle that sort of alignment, and what I'm using is PixInsight. That's a specifically astrophotography designed software, and it can handle this without a problem. You can probably hear the mount is reversing its orientation now. Now it's programmed to allow it to settle for 30 seconds. And that just allows everything to kind of settle, any vibrations that might have resulted from the flipping. And once this time has passed, it will take another image, assess the position of the stars, and do more of the plate solving like it did at the beginning of the session. Now it's not inside, it says not inside the tolerance zone, so it's already compared the star formation with known star formation, and it's going to slew the telescope until the Pleiades are back in the center, albeit upside down. There you go. Remember the star pattern we had before, which was more of an inverted dipper. Now we see that's right side up. And that's fine. With PixInsight can easily handle that and align the images even though some are upside down compared to the others. Now it's already achieved its proper alignment. It's going to start guiding again. And then once it starts guiding, it's going to resume imaging. We're in the middle of the sequence right now, so it's got more imaging to go before it's completing all 50 iterations. Again, it's allowing for some time to settle. Down here, it's waiting a few seconds before it begins imaging again. And here you can see it's starting another 5-minute exposure. We're only 11 iterations in out of 50, so it's going to take another 40 images before the sequence is complete. And at that time, we'll do our flat fields. Okay, now we're done with the sequence, and I want to demonstrate another very useful feature of N.I.N.A, and that is called the Flat Wizard. And flat fields, for anyone who doesn't know, are designed to compensate for unevenness in the illumination of the image that's caused by the optics. For instance, this little dark area that you'll see around periphery here, that's called vignetting, and that's where the light falls off toward the periphery. And also these little shadows here that are caused by dusts in the optic's path. Flat fields are designed to compensate for those and make it a more even field. And this is done by taking images that are exposed to an even light source, evenly illuminated light source. In this case, I'm going to use a small architect's drawing board, which is illuminated. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to slew to the zenith, and you'll hear it moving the telescope. I forgot the auto guiding was still going, so I'm going to go back over to PhD2, which is our auto guiding software, and I'm going to stop it. Okay, now it's finished slewing to the zenith. I'm going to go ahead and put the light source on to the top of the telescope aperture. And now I'm going to start the process. And so what you're going to see is it will start at the maximum exposure, which is 1 second, and this screen is going to be overly saturated. And then it's going to back off the time in increments until it finds the exposure where the histogram is about 50% saturated. And then it's going to take a sequence of, set for 10, I'm going to turn that to 20. 20 seems to be a good number to use to get an average flat field. Okay, now when I push the start, it's going to start taking some images. Now it's taking a series of images, starting with 1 second, and you can see that it's overly saturated. And it's reducing the exposure, we'll be able to see down here, gradually decreasing the exposure. Now it's 0.07 seconds, now it's 0.07. And then you can see right here in the histogram is about half saturated. There's some higher and some lower, but this is a good exposure, you can see. And the defects are pretty obvious, the ones that we saw in the main image. These defects, which are dust, all these small defects, small circles, are dust in the optical path. And you can see the darkening of the corners, which is the vignetting that we talked about. But in the meantime, it's taking a series of 20 images, and it's on 16 right now, and it's going to continue until it's finished, and these are going to be perfect exposures for our flat fields. Now we can see that it's stopped at 18, and that's one of the problems with the Canon EOS RA. When it's taking a series without pauses between the images, sometimes it clogs the transfer of information, and so it's stopped at 18, which is what we see right here. So I'm just going to reset the camera and take a couple more images. But the point is that it determined the exposure that was necessary to get a perfect flat field, which you see right here. And unfortunately, I only got 18 out of 20, but that should be fine. And now we've seen how N.I.N.A software, even though it's free, has a very, very broad range of utility, starting from framing the image, rotating if necessary, pointing to the object, plate solving to make sure it's centered in the field of view, autofocusing, and then taking a number of images that are primarily determined by whatever you think is necessary to expose properly and the conditions, the time of the night, etc., to decide how many images you want to take. And that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.